from lunch, everyone. Hope you had a great break. Now we are going to hear from our Attorney General. He was supposed to be here live today, but he got called to a very important event. So he's currently on a plane. So this morning, he literally called me at 10:30 last night to let me know he was getting on a plane to go represent Nevada somewhere very special tomorrow, which we'll hear a little bit more about tomorrow. But he wanted to send a message along, and so we're going to play a video from him right now so you can hear from him still, and we greatly appreciate him doing that for us. So take it away.
So good morning, everybody. I'm so sorry I couldn't be with you today at Medical in Progress at the summit. Something came up at the very last minute. I'm sure you'll be reading about it in the next couple of days. But instead of being able to show up in person, I'm going to be sending you this note right here to say thank you so much for all the work you've done. And to talk a little bit about the work that we are doing and will continue doing in the Office of Attorney General. We're coming up on a very important legislative session, as you know, and we will continue our focus pushing back on those who would take advantage of Nevada consumers by focusing on consumer protection laws. We're going to continue focusing on criminal justice issues, including trying to address some very important issues related to fentanyl and being able to prosecute those who are trafficking in fentanyl. We're going to continue our focus on elder abuse. We're going to continue our focus on addressing issues related to child abductions and to sex trafficking and human trafficking. And so we're going to work all around to be the people's lawyer. That's our slogan for the next few years, the people's lawyer. And I am determined and dedicated to ensuring that everyone in the state of Nevada knows that they have someone in the AG's office who is the people's lawyer. Our job will remain justice. We will continue to focus on justice. And as your people's lawyer, I will ensure that I will continue to focus on those things and try to do the best I can to make you proud. So thank you so much for having me today. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I want to wish you a very good summit and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Attorney General, so much for your words. We can't wait to work with you this legislative session and going into 2024. And also, big shout out to the Attorney General for all he's done to protect our elections, to protect Roe versus Wade in Nevada and abortion rights, all of the things we work on every single day. He's working on gun violence prevention. So he's been a real champion for us, and we appreciate his work on all of the issues. So if you can, tweet at him using hashtag Nevada Summit and give him a big shout out for being here today. Again, that's hashtag Nevada Summit. Reminder, share our social media, or you can do your own just using hashtag Nevada Summit. We want to make sure that we're sharing this out far and wide, and we're getting new people involved too. So share it on your social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it, put it there and let people know you're at the summit today. All right, you're going to hear some music. We're going to have a very, very short break, and we'll be back with you in just a second for our next panel. Stay tuned. All right, I am so excited to introduce this fabulous next panel. Some of my favorite people, and one maybe not so much, because they are here to talk all about messaging and what we can learn for 2024. Now, full disclosure, this was supposed to be Maria Teresa Lieberman, who is our deputy director, but there was a little snafu overnight, and so she's not doing it anymore. I am. So this is all about her work and her good work this past election cycle. So I want to be very clear. I am not taking credit for Maria's brilliance. That is all hers. I am literally just the fill-in, which I'm not going to probably do a very good job. So I want to introduce some of my favorite folks. Mark Torres, he is with DS Political and one of our fabulous allies in the fight to get everything up on social media everywhere. We have Lonnie Scott, who is my frenemy from Michigan. He is one of our partner states who is a Progress Now affiliate and truly one of my best friends. I give him so much trouble all the time, every single day. And so he is joining us from Michigan. And then one of my other best friends, Mary Bogus, she is joining us from Colorado. She's with Grow Progress. I actually have worked with Mary for over 10 years now. We work together at Planned Parenthood. and I am auntie to her child, Tilly. So I love this panel, and I'm excited that I get to moderate it now. Sorry, Maria, I'm filling in. All right, friends. So messaging. What can we learn for 2024? And frankly, what did we learn from 2022? So first and foremost, I'm just going to open it up to all of you to answer this question, this general question. What is messaging? What is message testing? And why is it used? And why should our audience at home even care? So Mary, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, hi Anetsky. Thanks for having me. Don't be shocked if you see Tilly in the background at some point. But hi everyone. Like Annette said, my name is Mary. Last name is Bogus. That is my real last name. It's Polish. But I am super happy to be here from afar. But I mean, for me, I think message testing is really, really important because we have a lot of evidence that actually says that a lot of persuasion messaging doesn't actually work. Which if you think about it, like that makes a lot of sense. Like it's really, really hard to change someone's like deeply held beliefs or attitudes on things. And so being able to test your messages, try to understand, what works, what doesn't work, what maybe works with some people but not others, really just helps you, sort of obviously have a more effective program, but also helps you just make better decisions. You want to test something and make sure that it's doing the thing that you want it to do before you go spend a bunch of money doing it. So that's really, I think, why I think testing is so important.
Lonnie, why do you think message testing is important for our volunteers, our activists, and the people watching today?
Well, I think the reason that message testing is so important is actually kind of intuitive, which is why it's funny to me that we've never done it in this way in campaigns, because they're doing it this way in marketing and in other parts of our lives. They've been doing that for a long time. But message testing is important because each of us have different ways that we receive messages. And it's as simple as that. We all hear something, we can hear one thing and all think about it in a different way. And until we have tested to know how people are receiving the message, we don't know how that will impact. And in the work that we do, that your activists are doing, that everyone in the audience here is doing to promote specific policies or specific political leaders, we really need to know how those messages are received. And it used to be, I think, and Annette, this is when you and I started doing political communications, we really, it was a lot based on gut, right? We just wing it. And that works in a lot of ways. But now that we are getting more sophisticated in how we're talking to people, and we are really communicating in different ways, and we have to communicate in different mediums, it's no longer that you can put up one television ad or one radio ad and still reach all the audiences that you need to hear the message that you're trying to get out there. And so being able to test and to fine tune our messages is really important. And what that testing allows us to do is to be able to then message people where they're at, but also to know how effective we are with different groups, right? Maybe the folks that really need to hear a message about gun violence prevention hear that message differently than they hear a message about affordable housing. And what is the language that we need to get to those folks to really get them to care about those specific issues, or to talk to them about the issues that they already care about in a way that actually causes them to take action. And so message testing is a very important component of all of the work that we're doing, no matter if we're working on political campaigns or issue campaigns.
Mark, I want to, same question for you, but I want to phrase it a little differently. Nevada saw the largest amount of political ad spending in 2022. The most money was spent here, and we have some of the smallest audiences in the country because, the population base is Elko, Washoe, Clark. So talk to us about why message testing is also important in that context and how we're using it in that context too.
Sure, and just to back up both Lonnie and Mary in this, everything that they've said is absolutely correct with that. I think at the core of it, though, with message testing at like a very fundamental level, the way we are consuming media, whether it's traditional through television and newspapers, all the way down to mail, is changing. And more so too, it's just there's so much information coming at us at once that expecting recall of ads once you see them or anything really is absolutely critical instead of just trying to use it instead of using it and doing it the way you've done it in the past. I think above all, I think there's a standard rule that someone needs to see an ad at least 10 times to have recall. And if you're not testing various messages against issues or with audiences to see how certain issues land with them, it becomes a lot more. It becomes an uphill battle to fight, and there's no real way to actually measure impact, which is kind of what goes back to Mary's point earlier about most folks aren't persuaded by ads, or just persuasion with digital doesn't work sometimes if it's not set up correctly. I think that's the caveat with that. If it's not set up correctly, you're not going to be able to move audiences in the manner that you want to do them. So it's important to test. It's I think I'm going to steal a line out of Mary's outline here, but it's important to test early. It's important to test often, and more importantly, you need to test again. So again, kind of going back to what I said earlier, the way that we consume media these days as a whole, as a society, not even voters, but just as a society, is so dynamic now that if you aren't message testing to see which messages stick against specific audiences, you're not going to be able to move the needle at the end of the day.
So this work we do, I think a lot of people just think, well, we spend some money, we do some polling, and then we slap up some messages and some ads and we run with it. But there's actually a real science behind the work that the four of us do, our teams do. I know people don't probably think that, but there is a science behind it. And what you think might work doesn't always work. Me and Maria were shocked by some of the message testing we did that worked. Mainly my husband was very persuasive amongst many Nevadans, shocking to me. So is it important to test before you spread a message through ads, or even for our folks at home through social media, through other methods? So Lonnie, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to say that for your husband's benefit, he was persuasive to all of the other Nevadans except for you, it sounds like. So it was very good for him. It's very important to do this testing, but it's also very important that we have changed fundamentally how we are communicating with folks because of this. And certain people are going to be reached better by different platforms, different streams, different content, different words. There are so many details that can be found in language and communication that we had simply not tapped into before. And so the new way of communicating with folks using values as opposed to demographic data is hugely important. And figuring out how to reach those folks with those messages is a large part of that. And so to your point, I have to give credit to Dana from my team in Michigan who drafted a bunch of our ads and concepts. What we started seeing in Michigan was some really, what I would have said out there kind of ideas at first that, as a professional who's been doing this for a long time, I looked at some of the concepts and said, yeah, that's not going to work, but I guess if you want to try it, go ahead. And so I have to admit that I was 100% incorrect. And we did an ad in Michigan that was based on astrology and horoscopes that I looked at and said, oh my God, this is ridiculous. This will never work, and was quickly proven wrong, both in our message testing that showed that it was very persuasive. And then again, once it was deployed in the real world, and it actually became our best performing ad on several different channels, different streams, I should say, not channels. So different social platforms. And I think that, that is the crux of this program. And what I was so excited about in Nevada and the work that your team all did there with Battleborn Progress was to be able to take some of those concepts, to not be afraid to try things that are new, and to really reach out in a way that people never have before. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll let the real experts talk about this, is that, we have been doing this in Michigan. We sort of pioneered this effort to communicate with folks based on values as opposed to demographic data in 2018. And we keep fine tuning that. But just to give people the example of why it's important, myself and my two neighbors both voted, or we all voted for Governor Gretchen Whitmer. But none of us did so because we lived on the same street. And if you think about the way that we run political campaigns, that's often how we're talking to people. It's based on how they look or where they live. And to be able to use messages that we've tested that actually talk to people about what they care about and how they think, that's a brand new concept. And it was very exciting to see Nevada helping to lead the way in changing the way that campaigns are done.
Yeah, and I think we do have to think more strategically about the way we're doing messaging, because if you've got millions and millions of dollars pouring into places like Nevada, how are we going to actually cut through and persuade people? And a lot of those ads that Dana put together, we actually put up here as well because they were persuasive here too. So big shout out to Dana. Mary, I want to bring you back in for this exact same question. Is it important to test before you spread a message through ads, social media, other things, and why?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton more to add, honestly, than what Lonnie said. I think he covered a lot of really important points. I think the one thing I would say is that, we talked obviously about testing messages to see if they work or not. And so when we're talking about message testing, we usually are talking about the ads as if, okay, cool, we were able to measure whether or not they were persuasive. Sometimes we measure no effect, or what folks will call no effect or null. That just means, hey, it didn't really do anything. But then the other thing that's really important about testing is testing for backlash. So messages that actually move people away from the outcome that you're trying to achieve. And I think, this is important with any issue, but I think especially with issues that, folks would consider more polarizing. There's, whether it's abortion or you're talking about gun safety, there are going to be people who may potentially be persuaded by certain messages, but maybe not that message. So I think that's another important thing to think about is when you're testing messages is actually there is sometimes a risk of pushing people away from the thing that you're trying to do.
Mark, same question.
Yeah, I definitely do think it is important to test before and during and also over the course of a buy as a whole. I think the biggest thing here, just to add on more to what both Lonnie and Mary said, is that it's important to actually understand what your audiences are doing, because the challenge when you're running these long campaigns, the reality of it is that the way we set up programs now is no longer just the short 4 to 6 weeks persuasion with GOTV type of program. If you're really looking to move audiences, you're running 6-8 months at a time, maybe longer, depending on if funding is available to you in that instance. The biggest thing with that, though, is that, like Mary said, you need to be able to monitor backlash and see where folks are essentially falling off when it comes to actual engagement. Because what you don't want to do is start to put messages out there and just start sticking. And then it allows you to really go back to look at how we are crafting the audiences, if the audiences are even movable at all, and things like that. I guess, one big thing here too, right, is that with testing as a whole, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many other components that this touches. And it's important too, when you're thinking about testing, where else are you applying that to your overall programs when you're building them out? So that's one big thing just to kind of end on as well too on that point.
And I just want to remind the folks at home, these folks are the legit experts on all things ads. So if you've ever sat on your couch and saw an ad come on your TV and wondered, how did that get there? Or how did this come about? Or who thought of this? It's usually the people on this call that are some of the brains behind those operations. So if you have questions, or if you were like, how did this social media get into my feed? These are the folks to ask, because they're going to be the ones to know that. So reminder, put your questions in the Q&A box, and we will get to as many questions at the end of this panel as humanly possible. All right, so how does testing work? And Mary, I'm going to come straight to you. You work with Grow Progress. It is a testing platform. So I'm going to direct this one straight to you. How does it work, and how do we explain it in like normal human terms to the folks watching?
So don't be a data robot. Is that what you're telling me? Yeah, I'm not a data scientist. I just pretend to be one sometimes. Yeah, so I think like Annette said, so Grow Progress, we are a testing platform. There's a lot of different testing platforms out there. This has been a space that there's been a ton of like investment and innovation, especially over the last probably like 5 or 6 years. So I'm going to sort of just focus on like the way that we do it, but it's really important to us that we are able to measure whether or not people are actually persuaded by something. And so we use something basically called a randomized control trial. You probably have actually like come into contact with a randomized control trial in your life. Like if you have ever seen like a blood pressure medication on TV, they'll talk about a control trial. Basically all that means is that when we test, we hold out a placebo or a control group. These are folks that are not going to see any of our messages, and they just serve as our baseline. These are the people that we're going to compare the impact of our ad against. And so what we do at Grow Progress is, folks load up whatever the messages they want to test. Let's say they wanted to test like 3 different videos. And so what would happen is they load the test, and then we pull a group of people together. We do something called randomization, which is basically just we try to split them up into fairly equal groups in terms of like sort of similar demographics, and just try to make them as similar to each other as possible. And so then, what will happen is folks will, in each group, will see your ad except for that control group. And then at the end of the video, we would ask them a couple of questions. And those are the questions that we would then try to measure whether or not we moved people. And we basically compare that to, again, that control group or that placebo group, and take the difference between those. And so sometimes what will happen is you might have, all of your ads might have been persuasive. Sometimes only one of your ad is, or sometimes they're all null. It really just depends. But that sort of is like, we think is kind of the most sort of the best way to be able to measure what's called like a causal effect. So like, did our message, did our ad, was that the thing that actually changed somebody's mind versus it just being like random chance? So how is that, Annette?
I think that's good. And we actually, yeah, that was good. And I'm going to pull in an audience question because I think it dovetails perfectly, Mary, for you on this. And it's from Susan, and she says, as a newbie, where does one learn the basics of message testing? Obviously, coming here, you can learn some of these basics, but if somebody really wants to dive into something like this, where would they go?
Yeah. I would probably recommend that you hit up my former place of employment called the Analyst Institute. So for folks that are not familiar, Analyst Institute is another progressive organization kind of within our sphere, and they do testing. So they test, not only messages, they also test things like how effective is it to send mail to voters, or how effective is it to, what length of video is the most effective when it comes to like a digital ad. And you can become what's called an analyst group member. It's free $99. And there's a ton of resources on the website. They do a ton of trainings and have a lot of different ways to ask questions. I think that's honestly a great place to start. I think obviously like you have a ton of resources with the folks at Battleborn Progress, in terms of kind of learning some of this stuff, but that would definitely be one place that I would recommend.
Thanks for that, Mary. And we're going to get to other audience questions in just a few minutes. I see some really good ones rolling in. All right, Lonnie, I want to come to you. So you started this first in Michigan, and most of the time that's how programs work. I'll start it or you'll start it, and then we, trade. So you really helped us kind of learn this program and learn how to do message testing this past election cycle, and really mentored Maria on our team who led this work for us. So how has testing worked in states like Michigan and Nevada and other Progress Now affiliates who are doing this cool, innovative new work?
Yeah, well, I just want to say, in case folks, so we use Grow Progress testing. That's why Mary's here talking about all of the great things that Grow Progress does. There are lots of ways to test a message, and I do want to make sure that I say that out there. There are plenty of different concepts that other Progress Now affiliates may be using. This is, for us, has been the most successful, and I think that the importance of message testing is that you're doing it, right? So I don't want folks to get caught up necessarily in how they're doing it as much as that they are attempting to do it. And so just wanted to make sure that I said that as well. I think we are always happy to share ideas. I think Annette started by saying we're frenemies. We actually came in together. So for those of you who have not heard the history of Lonnie and Annette in the audience, we started at almost the same exact time, me leading Michigan, her leading Nevada. And so it's been several years, almost a decade. Am I allowed to say that? We're getting old. Of trading ideas back and forth. I think the exciting part about this for me is that it really, more than just the message testing, it is changing the way that we're communicating. So we are testing those messages in a different way, certainly. But the reason that we're doing that is to find out the best way to talk to each individual. And so being able to fine tune our messages based on what's important to someone is very important. And I want to say too, and this is echoing something that Mary started to talk about earlier. I think in our work, a lot of times we see failure or something not working as failure. And with message testing, I just want to remind everybody that finding a message that doesn't work is just as important as finding the message that does. And so this testing, I don't want people to get discouraged because sometimes you're going to test a bunch of messages and they're all going to come back as not persuasive, right? Mary said earlier, the majority of messages are not persuasive. And so starting with the understanding that not every message you test is going to be perfect, but every time we test, we get better, I think is what's really important to test to say about message testing. That finding out what doesn't work is just as important as finding out what does, and the ability to take that then and fine tune that and continue to test throughout your program is something that is also really important for us to learn. I mean, the new way of activism, not necessarily in Nevada. Nevada loves to knock doors, but in some states where doors are becoming less and less effective, frankly, this type of communication and the way that we're doing things is going to change how organizing works completely. So understanding that you don't always have to get it right on the first try, but the important thing is that you're testing it and learning every time you do it.
Lonnie, I have this question from Leanne in the chat, and I really like it because I think it speaks to some of what you're talking. And she says, I was totally put off by how much political mail I received this last election cycle. If you say so, I'll believe you. But does your testing show that heaps of mail really helps a candidate or a cause? Or maybe I'll add, what's better and what can we be doing better in terms of like our work?
That is a great question. We also, I will admit, we also sent heaps of mail here in Michigan, so guilty. This is kind of what we're saying though, that people receive information in different ways. And so yes, there are people that it is effective to send them a piece of mail because it is one of those touches that they're getting that message, like Mark said earlier, they have to hear it a certain number of times for them to be able to recall it. And so there are some folks that is an effective way. I will say, this may be an unpopular opinion, and I'm sure that Annette will share it with folks so they can yell at me later. I will say that I think overall, post-COVID, our side has resorted to mail in the place of doors in some instances, and I do not think that is effective. And so I do think that there is, yes, mail works in some instances. I fully believe that we should be communicating with folks across a ton of different platforms, but also sometimes we do things incorrectly. And I think we may be borderline having tried to replace door contacts and actual contact with voters with mail in some of those instances. So I think both of those things are true. And I hope that answered your question. I'm not sure that I fully got to what you were looking for.
Well, that's okay because Mark wants to hop in. So Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add on to that, what's interesting about when the way we run digital at our firm is that we're very audience first focused, meaning that we'll take the findings from what Mary's team has done and kind of compare and contrast that, more importantly, to what we also want to recommend based on the targeting and just kind of mesh that all together. One of the things that we're also able to do too is within using the data that we have access to, typically a voter file, there's scoring in there that you may or may not know of how we consume media. A cost-effective way to really, this is why some folks will get more mail and others will not, is it's strictly based on your consumption scores and or how the mail universe was initially cut. Now, one of the things that we recommend, obviously, given that, here in Nevada, the three major areas are Elko, Clark, and Washoe counties, you need to be able to cut through the noise effectively. And sometimes what we do is if the universes are just absolutely massive, but we need to reach them, we make recommendations based on various factors, one of them being someone's likelihood to engage with digital versus not. And what we'll do sometimes, we'll make the recommendation that when you're cutting your universes, just make sure you're always serving ads to the folks that are actually going to connect with them on digital so that they're actually being served to those folks directly. Whereas the others, you can put them into the more field focused, the mail focused buckets. But to say the least, the reason why a lot of folks get mail in general, it goes back to recall, right? You want to make sure that you're recalling the messages that you're seeing on your connected TVs, on your phones, and then also in the mail. So, there's a rule of 10. You need to see something at least 10 times for it to actually have any sort of recall effect. Obviously, that kind of depends on a number of factors, but just for the purposes of round numbers, that's the number you actually kind of want to think about and use when you're looking at that. But yeah, Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing I really wanted to say, so I just want to say that I see you, the person that asked you this question. I feel you so deeply. There was a gubernatorial primary in Colorado a few years ago, and I kid you not, I was getting 15 pieces of mail a day. So you think again, what we know from research is most of the tactics that we use to communicate with voters can work. The thing is and mail is one of them. Mail is actually one of those sort of tried and true tactics. I think some of that has to do with the fact that it's not an interruption. People can sort of look at mail at their leisure, or as they, real quick as they take it to the garbage. But I think an important thing here that I think Lonnie and Mark both said a little bit about this, but is all of these, any kind of tactic, whether it's digital, whether it's mail, whether it's canvassing phones, they all plateau at some point. And so being able to build a layered program where you're talking to people with in a lot of different ways is a really important piece of just kind of good campaign planning in general. And I think the other thing, this is again, I think why being able to test messages before you launch a program is really important, because and Mark kind of said this, the thing about those mail pieces is there was probably, maybe there are a couple of good pieces in there, but there's probably a lot of pieces that looked exactly the same and said exactly the same things. If it's we've all seen the sort of candidate pieces where it's a beautiful picture of their family, on a walk in a park. And it's sure, that's nice. But again, those things don't really stand out to you. And so I think that's a great thing about doing both message testing and creative testing on, testing platforms, is you can also try new things. Try things. I mean, Lonnie was talking earlier, you can try things that sound absolutely wild, but what we are seeing is that those things that are different are actually really memorable to people and sort of sticking out among a crowd of red, white, and blue flyers. So that's just the only thing I wanted to say.
I just want to say we are going to put some of our ads in the chat for you. We ran them all through our pack, but since the election's over, it's fine. So we're going to put the ASMR ones that Mark actually helped us put up, and those were actually different from Lonnie's. We actually told him about the ASMR ones, so he copied us on that. And then we're going to put some of the ones that he ran and we ran here based on Dana's ideas for the horoscope ones. So this way y'all can take a look at them on the breaks because they're pretty cool. And you may not have gotten them because you may not have been our target. So now you can see them. Mark, so we worked with you all election cycle to put those exact same ads up, and you helped us run all this digital program across the state. And advertising is constantly changing, but it's really changing now. And it's changed over the past few years. So what's the current landscape on digital ads, especially with, some of the things going down at Twitter, Facebook, and the ever-changing landscape that we have?
Yeah, I would say that, just to kind of take a step back from that, I think the way we've traditionally consumed media over the last 4, 6, 8, 10 years has exponentially changed. And more importantly, what happened with COVID in 2020 definitely changed the way we as political professionals communicate with the folks we look to seek and the folks we want to talk to, right? So with that being said, I think that, it's important to just always you need to be agile when you're thinking about building out programs, and more importantly, think about different ways to reach folks outside of just running buys on Facebook and things like that. Because one of the things that we're finding quite a bit is that Facebook, especially in 2020 and 22, they decided to just have basically a blacked out period of when ads can go back up or not. But also too, right? A lot of folks will put a lot of stake into Facebook, which I think has its place in the universe, respectively. But at the same time, you can't expect your entire target list of folks and audiences that you want to reach to live on there, because in a lot of ways, it's a walled garden, meaning that you have to actually be a part of Cool Kids Club that's inside Facebook in order to be served ads, and that's assuming that they're even allowing that. So definitely making sure you have an even spread of the placements that you're looking at running is important. But then also too, with the changing landscape, I mean, we're seeing it. We've been able to do a whole lot more in the last year than we have ever before, because the partners we work with allow us to run political all the way through election day without any issues. But more importantly, it's just making sure that we're in compliance with local laws as well too, right? I mean, election laws are not the same everywhere. Certain states have certain regulations and things like that, so it's just making sure that we're kind of at the tip of it. I mean, if there's something that's interesting is that states like Washington State don't allow, for a while they didn't allow digital ads to be run, namely on platforms like Facebook, for a number of reasons. But it's just making sure that wherever you're running your programs, it's aligned to how you're looking to potentially reach folks. I mean, we've always been audience first focused. We'll take a voter file, a list of any sort you have, match those folks to figure out who has a footprint online, and serve ads to those folks on a one-to-one basis. But there's a lot of other ways you can do that too, right? So it's just making sure that your understanding of what you're looking to do is in alignment with kind of what your expectations are as a whole.
All right, Mark, same thing for you. I'm going to give you an audience question that I think is relevant to this one in particular. I think a lot of people don't know how this advertising stuff works. They're just like, how am I getting this? Why am I getting this? Where am I getting this? So somebody asks, is this similar to how Netflix recommends a show you would watch next? And is that the kind of data we're talking about to see like, oh, this person should see an ad, but maybe this person shouldn't see this ad?
Yeah, it's exactly that, right? I think I'm going to say something it may throw some folks off, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's something that we all need to acknowledge is the raw data point of some sort, right? Or either if you are a renter, you have a bank account, you have any sort of footprint online, all that information is easily accessible, and that's how a lot of these things, like for example, shows on Netflix that you watch, or even on Apple TV Plus or whatever. That's how a lot of this is curated, is based on user behavior. So if you are known to watch a whole lot of The Crown, for example, on Netflix, it'll recommend shows very similar to that in nature. In the same way with ads as well too, is that based on your user behaviors where you're at online, that's where the ads go. So essentially the ads that we put up The way I liken it is to similar. We've taken the technology that companies like Amazon, Target, and Walmart have used to advertise commercially, and applied that to be used for political. So, for example, if you're going to the Review Journal here in Nevada or Vegas, and then you are then going to ESPN and then maybe a food blog, those ads that you see on the various websites, that's the back end of kind of how we set up the programs that we run overall. It allows us to basically it allows us to follow user behaviors online to make sure that we're getting that recall effect and making sure that folks are actually seeing the ads. And again, it'll also tell us too if folks aren't even seeing them at all either, right? So again, like what Lonnie said earlier, just I think we get stuck in this mode of wanting things to work really well when we do testing, and then just not wanting things to fail essentially. And I encourage folks to allow that to happen, because that teaches you if it's working or not straight up. So yeah.
And I can tell you this is true because Mark put up our ads and I started seeing them on Food Network, and that's how I knew they were running, as I would see them on my TV on Food Network, and I was like, oh my gosh, look, we're on TV. This is so cool. So it's true. It works that way, I promise. So Mary, coming back to you, what makes Grow Progress different from other testing methods, and why is it so unique and cool?
Sure. I mean, again, like I said, like there's a lot of different testing platforms. I think, you know, a lot of different folks doing really cool things. I think like the way that we sort of think about our work is, I think the biggest thing is like we are really committed to making testing as like radically affordable as possible, because we want more people to be testing. We want more people to have access to that kind of tools and those kinds of learnings, so that they can run more effective programs. I think another piece is we offer also just like a lot of customization. So, you know, we sort of have there's different types of research methods, right? There's more qualitative, there's more quantitative, there's all kinds of different things. And, you know, we sort of have this like pretty specific research method, but we also understand that people are trying to meet a lot of different goals and they're trying to learn different things. And so, you know, we are adding tools to help people answer more sort of like qualitative questions, like, why do we think someone was persuaded by this message and things like that. I think the other piece is, so the platform is meant to be like totally do it yourself. And I think we've worked really hard to make it as like easy to launch and interpret a test as possible. Like you don't need to be a data scientist to be able to like glean something important from your test results. Like obviously we have a team of folks who are happy to work with people and help them, you know, kind of maybe pull out learnings that maybe they didn't see the first time. But I think that's really important, is that like we're able to kind of democratize this information as much as possible, and make it easy for people to be able to like interpret and be able to like do something with that information. So that's what I would say is a little bit different.
Thanks, Mary. Lonnie, I want to come to you next so we can get some better screenshots of you so you can stop whining on the internet about that. How do you take a test and turn it actually into a message that will spread across platforms? And how do you make it actually, like, how do you take the test that Mary just talked about and turn it into something real that we can use in an ad?
Yeah, I think that's the key to the testing, and that's the reason that you're doing it, is to be able to figure out how to deploy it. Our strategy here is all about content creation and producing a bunch of content. I mean, I think it's no secret that progressives used to make a meme, put a couple $1,000s behind it and say they ran a digital program. Some still do. And so, you know, I think being able to really fine tune that message is important. And for us, it's been about creating multiple different messages, really to meet people where they are. I mean, it's the same thing that we were talking about earlier, and it's sort of a core concept of organizing. It's just applying those concepts to digital and communications as well. So we are able to take that message and figure out, which platforms are these folks on. To Mark's point earlier about people being a data point, they know, right? I mean, one of the scariest things that I learned after the 2020 cycle was about smart TVs, and just the way that targeting, the reason that a smart TV is $100 for an 85-inch screen is because they're selling your data. And so you can actually target an ad through a smart TV where you're responding to an ad that they already saw. So there's a system now where you can actually upload sort of your opponent's ad or an ad that you want to respond to and respond directly to it, and it knows that you viewed it and then plays you the ad in response. That's incredibly scary to me. But that technology is how you're getting to the question about Netflix and how you're getting Facebook ads and all of the things that people are targeting you with. It's no different here. It's just that we're trying to take those messages and talk to you about the issues that you care about. It's about knowing, using that data for good as opposed to just consumerism. And so I think that that's the biggest point here is that, all of this messaging and being able to talk to people where they are. Maybe it's that they're on Facebook and that they only watch 6-second videos. So we got to produce 6-second videos on Facebook. And maybe it's that they're on Instagram and you have to have catchy Instagram videos. My staff never lets me on those. I guess I'm too old for TikTok or Instagram. I know. So I stick to Facebook. But it's about making sure that you're communicating with people where they're at and talking to them about the things that are important to them.
Thank you, Lonnie. So Mark, as you know, we obviously have legislative session coming up here in about 2 weeks. And how can we use all of the message testing that we're talking about and the advertising and the advocacy that we're about to do during the legislative session, and really anything else that's like not election related? So how do we think about these ads and this message testing in a more global context, not just for elections?
Yeah, I think when you're, one of the nice things that we've been able to do is actually apply these exact similar tactics, for lack of better words, I suppose, into other avenues that are also political. So, for example, for advocacy around legislative advocacy, issue awareness, and also legislative pressure. I think one of the biggest things is, I know that there's always going to be competing priorities based on in any legislature. Wow, say that 5 times fast. I think the biggest thing with that is it's really getting a pulse on using the way you model, using the group progress model of values-based clusters versus just demographic clusters to actually build out effective voter universes that actually care about these things. So the way I look at digital as a whole is, yes, it's great we have our lobby days when we're all going to the Capitol and talking to our members and doing all that. But then there's also the other part of it too, where you actually have folks who are lobbyists that actually are working on behalf of progressive allied groups and things like that. But you use digital as a way to close the gap between the grassroots and the grass tops. Because what happens is that there's no real engagement that usually happens there. And also too, outside of just targeting legislators, and there's ways that we do that, it's also continuing to talk to your base of folks that are out there that care about these issues. I think the biggest thing here too is that you need to keep folks engaged. I think one of the things that a lot of folks will say, I know Lonnie Lavora already shared this with me many years ago there in Michigan. There's nothing more frustrating than when you're going to a swing. They reckon they're obviously a swing state, but there's nothing more frustrating than when you have to go back to parts of the state where you're trying to get folks to turn back up again or turn out again, but they haven't been spoken to, right? So this is, I think, one of the things that it's important to continue to communicate to your base around these issues and things like that, because there's no real way to do it unless you're actually knocking on doors, doing phone calls and things like that. And that can get prohibitively expensive as well too. So, if you're looking for something that is somewhat cost efficient and effective, this is one way you can certainly go about it.
Thank you. All right. So last question, and then we're going to go straight into some additional audience questions. And I'll ask all 3 of you this just to kind of think about next steps in the future, because that's really what we're doing at today's part of the summit is kind of looking back on 2022. What did we learn? What are the important things that we're thinking about? And then how do we plan as a progressive movement for the future? And how do we do advertising, message testing better in the future? So Mary, I want to start with you. What can we learn for 2024 and beyond? And how do we start planning for that now?
Yeah, I think, and I said this previously, but I think when it comes to testing is to try and think about your testing more kind of like holistically, if you will, and actually center your testing around like a theory of change. I think there's a lot of great uses for message testing. Like we have a lot of folks who use our testing platform for rapid message testing. So like when the Dobbs decision came down, Planned Parenthood is one of our clients, and they were using it to just like get out as many messages as possible to see like how to respond. But I think folks learn the most about like the audiences that they care about, and the like values that are most important to people, are sort of like most important about their issues, when you kind of take a step back and try to think about like, why do you think this ad or this concept or these values are going to be persuasive? Again, I think like the testing platforms are great for testing creative, but I think just like giving yourself a little bit more of a runway to think about like, what is the thing that like we think is persuasive. I know we have some of our partners who actually they've built like this like really great infrastructure around testing and sort of like socializing it across the organization, and like they will actually debrief a lot of times like after they have like a big messaging campaign to try to like not only identify things that worked, but try to like suss out reasons why they think something didn't work. So I think just like giving yourself a little bit more room to think about like what your sort of research question is can also be helpful when sort of shit hits the fan and you're trying to figure out like what to prioritize and like what to do next too.
Mark, same question for you. What are kind of looking ahead? What are some of the things we need to be thinking about on this topic?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, kind of one takeaway I've noticed from the last cycle and previous cycles is that the electorate as a whole is getting a lot more fractured, meaning that you're getting folks that are more likely to register as independents because they're sick of the two parties bickering, which is standard, but also, those are folks that care about things that are important to folks on our side of the aisle. So first and foremost, don't underestimate your audiences, because if you're not running programs earlier and really essentially treating the audiences, meaning that you're serving ads to them to see if there's any sort of recall or recognition or even backlash, it's going to make running a program a whole lot more efficient and effective in the big picture. It's also too knowing who you're talking to, right? I mean, it's depending on what your end goal is, it's important that you also understand the audiences that you're looking to talk to, and allow the data from that after you've run a program to kind of inform what the next steps are, or you modify other parts of the program that you're running as well too. As a former field person, it's like I wish we kind of had the way we approach digital now to provide a little bit of an air cover. So I'm able, if I'm doing different message talking track when I'm talking to voters at the door or whatnot, it allows you to be more flexible. And that is one of the things that's really great about digital too, is that you're able to be flexible with what you're doing. But more importantly, just innovate. Straight up, just innovate. I mean, try and put all your eggs in one basket on one platform isn't exactly the best way to do it. But I think it's just making sure that we've got everything kind of set up the way we need to, and going to where folks are online is pretty important too.
All right, Lonnie, same question for you. What can we learn for 2024 and beyond?
I think the biggest lesson, just adding on to what Mary and Mark both said, is that we don't know yet, right? We don't know what that horoscope ad is going to be for 2024. We don't know what those ASMR ads are going to be. And so the continuous testing, talking to people early, continuing the conversation is going to be critically important to make sure that we are ready. I also think that we have to be out figuring out the best way to talk about our victories. So the one thing I will say about messaging in general is that the progressives often struggle because we like to tell everybody lots of facts and figures. And that's not what connects with a lot of people very often. And so using the emotional storytelling, getting stories of real people who have been impacted, all of those types of things are the best type of communication in general. And that's certainly true. Or certainly will be true going forward. We've accomplished a lot with the Biden administration in 2 years in our states with progressive governors. And so I think, we have to be figuring out the best ways to talk about that and to tell people that story. And I shouldn't say I can guarantee you, because as soon as I do, Dana's going to test it and it's going to show me I'm a liar again. But I can almost guarantee you that it is not providing stats and figures to folks that's going to do that.
All right, so Lonnie, I'm going to stick with you. These are some of our audience questions. What makes a strong message and ensures it has buy-in from folks?
Well, I think I just hit on the most important part of that is to make it emotional. Messaging in general, you want to be able to tap into those emotions. Now, the hard part of that is, again, every person is different. And so what they're emotional about or what they value is going to vary. So I think you have to be able to tell stories and to explain to folks in a way that compels them to take some sort of action, right? So it can't be based in facts and figures. And the other thing that we have to remember is that it also, just because something is really feels emotional and you think it's really important, that may not have the same impact on everybody else. And so understanding our own personal bias about those messages, I think, is very important when you're drafting them. And then test. It's what this whole panel's been about. Test those messages in any way you can. Maybe you can't afford for a program to run it through some of the more expensive testing platforms. You can still do A and B testing. You can still put stuff up on Facebook and see what's working. Figure out your own testing mechanisms if you have to. But it's important to make sure that the messaging that you're using is actually effective.
Mark, this question comes from Aaron, and they ask, are folks on the right also, wrong question. Are there lessons from the message testing we can use in our personal interactions and conversations?
Yeah, I would say there definitely are. Because again, this is one of the nice things about digital as a whole is it's pretty nimble. Some of the things that I've seen folks do when it comes to testing is actually taking what the findings are and essentially recutting an entire voter universe to communicate to a whole other swath of folks that they haven't done before. And again, a lot of that is just it's actually it's working with partners and working with folks that are willing to explain that to you and explain how things are performing and where they should be. But yeah, I mean, it's taking it, the nice thing is it provides the feedback that we receive from the field. We can certainly apply if it's applicable, and there's essentially critical mass, because the thing is as folks are receiving ads, the frequency in which it happens varies on the person and how often they are online and are likely to engage with that. So that's one just big gigantic X factor towards that as a whole. So I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Mark. All right, and Mary, you get our final question, and this is from Sai, one of our dear friends over at Gender Justice. They ask, can you speak on scare tactic ads like Willie Horton that play on bigotry and fear? How can allies counter the ones about us trans folks being groomers? And I think we're seeing that so much. We saw it in Nevada, we saw it in Michigan. How do we push back on that? And if others have thoughts on that too, hop in after Mary.
Yeah, no, I appreciate this question. This is a really hard one. I think we've actually had a lot of folks this past cycle who were testing out messages specifically around those attacks. I think the thing that's really hard about this one is that really until the right started making this a thing, this wasn't something that most people were talking about. And so, these scare tactics, I think, providing people with information that is new can also be really persuasive. I think that's where like really honing in on the values-based message testing is really, really important. I think like trying to understand sort of those folks who are somewhat persuaded by those tactics and sort of that like bigotry and fear-based tactics, trying to understand like what the value is that's being kind of like pushed for them, I think is really important in thinking about like how to communicate with folks. I think this is like one of the most challenging things about persuasion is being able to like simultaneously meet people where they're at while also not like while also not like contributing to stigma or contributing to like really crappy rhetoric.
And there's my niece.
My toddler, she's so
Hi, Billy.
So I think that's like as like challenging and as like, to be frank, like painful as it might be to try to understand where some of those people are at. I think being a little curious about that is really important in trying to think about like, well, how do I talk to this person then? So yeah, I don't know if I like really.
Oh, Mary, I think you're breaking up, my love.
I think it's a really, really hard one, and it's a.
Okay, got you back. Lonnie, Mark, anything you want to add to that?
The only thing else I would say is that this is the importance of testing our messages versus theirs, because in some of these instances, I mean, I think we saw a lot of times people are scared to respond, right? And there are certainly times with misinformation and disinformation that you should not respond. But what we saw in Michigan when this popped up was Senator Mallory McMorrow take it head on the floor of the Senate and call it out. And the response was incredible. And so being able to, again, make it personal and talk about the issue and not be afraid to respond in some of those instances. But this is, to Mary's point, exactly why the testing is so important, because with some folks, that response isn't going to be compelling. And I think it's important for us to know that, because in some instances it can actually be harmful to be promoting the other side's language and the way that they're talking about things. That's actually what they're counting on, right? They're counting on us using their language, because for so long we have used Republican language in so many places, taxes, around all sorts of different things where we've adopted Republican language. And so we have to be smart about it, but also in some instances it's best to just push back directly. And we certainly saw that here in Michigan.
Yeah, one thing I'll add on to that as well too is that when you do pushback, it's important to see if the pushback and the messaging you're currently using is working, right? Because there's no other avenues outside of, well, there are other avenues that can show you quantifiable evidence of if there's any effect on this or not. But at least with running digital programs, it is data driven. It allows you to change up the messaging if it's not working. But more importantly, it's just it creates an avenue as well too for any sort of direct response, right? Something happens, you want to be able to activate an entire base of folks or talk to them and communicate with them, and sometimes you don't. So it is a very delicate issue as a whole, and I recognize that, and we do our best to make sure that what we are running is in line with what's correct. Meaning that there's instances where we've actually had to go back to clients if the messaging we felt was a little too aggressive and too strong, and make a recommendation off that. At the end of the day, clients going to make the folks that we work with are going to make that determination if they want to put that out or not. But that's one of the things that's important, is just being very cognizant of what it is you're saying when you're putting that all out there.
All right, well, I want to thank this fabulous panel and thank y'all for hopping on last second and saving us today. We really appreciate that because we had a little struggle last night. But thank you to these three amazing folks, and thank you for all of you for always supporting our work. And big shout out to Maria, because again, this was 100% based on her work. I was just filling in today. So all of the cool stuff they were talking about and all of those ads in the chat, that was done by Maria Teresa on our team. So big shout out to her because she should have been the one leading this. So we will be back with you in just a second. We're going to put on some very hip music, and then we're going to hop over to our next panel, and we'll be back with you in just a second. So see you shortly. All right, we're going to get straight into our next panel so we can stay on time, friends. So thank you for sticking with us. We're going to have a break in just a few minutes, but we really wanted to make sure to get to this next panel because it's going to be excellent. We have another excellent expert group of panelists here to talk to you about where do we go from here. So this is thinking ahead, thinking about next steps, because it's not just enough to look behind us. We got to look ahead and start planning for the future. And I'm not talking just 2023 in the legislative session. I'm talking 2024, the 2025 legislature, 2026 and beyond. So where do we go from here, and how do we start getting ahead on all of the work that we do? And this session is led by our fabulous Matilda Guerrero. She is our digital manager here at Battleborn Progress. In addition to that, we also have Emmy Ruiz, who many of you know from being here in Nevada for such a long time. She did so much work here for various campaigns. We have former Lieutenant Governor Kate Marshall joining us today. We're so excited about that. Eric Jang from One APIA, and Taylor Patterson from the Native Voters Alliance of Nevada. So I'm so excited, Matilda. Take it away. I'm excited to see you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you all are having a great summit. I definitely learned a lot from the previous message testing panel and felt very inspired by the Attorney General's words. For the friends who I have yet to have the pleasure of meeting, my name is Matilda Guerrero, and I'm the digital manager at Battleborn Progress. I use she, her, Oya pronouns. And today I am joined by an amazing panel from folks across the state and nationwide. Wink, wink, I would just do it, but I don't think I'm capable of it. And I'm excited to talk to you all about all the great things that we've done in the previous years. But what else do we need to do to keep fighting the good fight? And my friends on this panel have lots to say, and I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves. First off, I am excited and honestly very pleased to meet to introduce Emmy Ruiz, who is here on her personal capacity. Emmy, tell us about yourself.
Matilda, thank you so much for that kind introduction. I will tell you, I'm so happy to be here with you. It feels like being home at this event with Battleborn Progress. I have been not just a big fan, but a beneficiary of the incredible work that you all have done, advocating for, fighting alongside and for Nevadans for so many years. So first and foremost, thank you for all the work that you're doing. It's so nice to be here today with so many people and so many friends who I know have done incredible work. As you mentioned, I'm here in my personal capacity. In my day job, I'm the White House political director, President Biden, Vice President Harris. And, you know, I got my start in organizing in Nevada. And so I have worked in Nevada many times. I was a field organizer. I was actually the first field organizer hired for Hillary Clinton in 2007 for the Nevada caucus. And so it's so nice to be here. The best part of my work day, every day, no matter, you know, what job it is, has always been organizing, bringing people together, working alongside those of you that are on this Zoom, you know, doing this kind of work. And so I'm just so happy to be here with you today.
Well, we're very excited to have you here with us. We love having Nevadans back at home. Next up, I would love to introduce our former Lieutenant Governor, Kate Marshall. Before I turn it over to the LG, just wanted to say this on the record that one of the first things I ever learned about Nevada legislature was about the LG, and honestly, she is one of the very first and very few people I really wanted to meet so badly, and it finally happened. So turning up, it is the former Lieutenant Governor, Kate Marshall.
Good afternoon. How are you? I'm actually honored to be on such a panel with the folks that we have here. I'm Kate Marshall, former Lieutenant Governor. I did have the honor of working from afar with MP Ruiz at the White House, which I have recently left to come back home. Home means Nevada. And I would be remiss if I didn't say Happy New Year, because I think that we are right on top of the Year of the Rabbit, which is supposed to be a very prosperous year, which would be a good way for this conversation to go. Thank you.
Yes, Happy New Year, friends, and I hope that this year is filled with lots of love, good memories, and good luck to all my friends. Next up, we have one of my other friends, Taylor Patterson. Taylor, tell us all about you. Friend of the show.
Thank you so much, Matilda. I feel like this is about the 800th time I've introduced myself on a Battleborn Progress program, so I think a lot of the BVP family already know who I am, but I'm Taylor Patterson. I'm the Executive Director of Native Voters Alliance Nevada and a member of the Bishop Paiute Tribe and a very proud member of the Battleborn Progress Board. So I'm happy to be here. I don't ever miss a progressive summit, so.
That is very, very true. That is why Taylor has earned herself the title Friend of the Show. And last but not least, one of my favorite persons ever, Eric Lester Jang.
Hello everyone, my name is Eric Jang. I am the Deputy Director for One API Nevada. We are a progressive 501c4 advocacy organization for the Asian and Pacific Islander community here in the state of Nevada. And thank you again, Lieutenant Governor, and thank you for wishing right now it's Happy Lunar New Year. I think we're right on the dot here. So 新年快乐, 恭喜发财, 恭喜发财, and 中文南来. So that's Mandarin, Cantonese, and Vietnamese. That's the extent of my language skills. I moved here to this great state 5 years ago, but now I call home means Nevada to me, the sage and the pines, and so on. So it's very excited to share the space with all this powerful, amazing, and really inspiring ladies, actually. So right here, I was born in New York, but I grew up in Taiwan. I started organizing through student movement back in Taiwan, understanding how the community, how to get people together to care about important issues that take collective actions to solve. And I think I brought that when I moved to the States for college and being able to start from the political campaign side, from the cyclical working on from midterm campaigns to presidential campaigns, now finding a place that I've been here cycle through cycle and legislative session through legislative sessions, a place that we can build and grow our community. So very excited to share.
If you needed one more reason to love Eric, he just listed many of them. So please join in the Eric Lester Jang fan club, because I am definitely one of the proud members there. Alrighty, now that you've all met my friends, I have lots of questions for this panel. I'm going to start off with Emmy. So Emmy, your story is one to follow. From your time on Secretary Clinton's campaign, President Obama, Vice President Harris, and now the White House. Can you talk to us about some ups and downs from going from campaigns to governing and vice versa? How do you adjust and manage your expectations while staying true to yourself and your values?
That's a great question, Matilda. I mean, look, I will tell you, I think a few lessons learned for me is one is organizing is the best job I have ever had. Organizing in Nevada, knocking on doors in East Las Vegas and all around Las Vegas and North Las Vegas. Shout out to your Lieutenant Governor there. I think that it's really important to carry the stories of the people that you meet and that you come across, right? And so I learned a lot door knocking. I learned a lot through our volunteers and people that I got to know in places like Nevada, but also across the country. And so one is, you always carry the stories of the people that have made these efforts possible, right? And so, for example, you know, in the day job at the White House, there are a lot of people that made that possible. There are the voters, there are the volunteers, there are leaders like those of you on this call. And it's really important to always remember who got you to that specific place, right? Whether it be my position or just the fact that, you know, we have a Democratic White House and we have a Democratic Senate, and we have, you know, I think really strong legislatures across the country and in places like Nevada. And so one is to remember who are the people that got you there, to remember the stories that got you there and the people that were vulnerable enough, they cared enough, they trusted you enough to entrust you with those stories. So it's really important to never forget who you're fighting for. And then three is, of course, I think for me, one that's really important is to always remember where you come from, right? Before I was ever in politics, the values that were instilled in me by my immigrant parents, by my older brothers, by, you know, my education institutions and what I learned along the way. So it's really important to always remember who you are, where you come from, and who got you there, and the stories of those that have really impacted you along the way. I mean, so, you know, probably very similar to those that are attending the summit. It's just always really important to try to stay focused and remember that in the hard moments and in the great, big, successful moments. I think probably one of my biggest lessons learned, you know, from being an organizer to the position that I hold today is that progress takes time, right? And it requires a lot of patience, and it requires a big coalition of bringing people together, right? Addition over subtraction in our coalitions, in our teams, in our organizations, in our campaigns, in our volunteer efforts. And so I think that has required a lot of patience, but I think as we've been able to see over the last few years, progress is possible. And so, you know, a lot of uplifting along with those lessons learned.
Wow, you just gave me some new mantras. I'm definitely going to write this down. I like that. Progress is possible. Now, speaking of progress, I know that it takes a lot to fight the good fight. We're constantly thinking about what's next, how we can continue delivering for working families, and honestly, we're always strategizing in one way or another. Tell us, I want to know, how do you take care of yourself, and what do you do to keep yourself motivated?
Well, I mean, I think that's a great question. Look, I will say this. I think my advice to everyone is that I think in our work as organizers, longevity is very important, right? A lot of times, people come in and out of the work that we do, and they leave not because they want to, but because it's unsustainable, right? Or they feel that it's unsustainable and doing the things that they love, the priorities that they have, taking care of their families, taking care of themselves. I have been very fortunate in my journey and in my pathway that I have a very understanding and supportive partner. We have 2 small boys together, my wife and I do. And so without her support, I definitely would not be able to do that. And without the support of the team that I have and the colleagues that surround me, right, they themselves make a lot of sacrifices so that I can spend time with my boys, so I can do drop off in the morning or pick up in the afternoon. And I never forget the sacrifices that they make. In terms of taking care of myself, look, I think just being self-reflective, I have some room to go. But I really try to consider and ask myself, what are the things that I need in my personal life in order for me to be happy and in order for me to feel like I can do both? Be a wife, be a mom, be a daughter, while holding my other set of priorities, which is my passion, my work, my commitments, my values, my professional values, which, as you all know, our values in the work that we do also are our personal values when it comes to our work. And so some of that is making sure that I'm spending time with my kids, making sure that whenever they need me, I'm not thinking twice of where I need to be. I know exactly where I need to be. In terms of really taking care of myself, I mean, I have some work to do, so I'm looking forward to getting any other tips that people might have here. But, you know, and I always try to remember that I am a leader of my team, and I also have some responsibility to set an example for my team and the things that they can do and should do to take care of themselves. So more of don't do as I do as I say.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I find myself thinking the same exact thing. In fact, I was just telling my husband, you should definitely take a nap before you go into work because I know that you're going to be up for a while. And what did I do the night before? I definitely stayed up a little too late, reading too much. So I completely agree. Do as I say, but not as I do. Don't look at what I did. So I have another question for you. So over the past few years, we've seen women, particularly women of color, make big waves. From the confirmation of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, our first woman and woman of color vice president, and Nevada's majority female legislature. What advice do you have to give to young folks, particularly women of color, and honestly to anybody?
I mean, I would say, I think we have to, a lot of times, right, it's easy to stay focused or to see the obstacles that we face. Because they are staring us day in and day out in our lives and our experiences and the work that we do, even amongst our colleagues who could be well-meaning, but, anyway. I think it is really important for us to lift up those that are in these positions, like the vice president, like Ketanji, Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, and many others. I mean, you had a great lieutenant governor with Kate Marshall, who I'm very fortunate to be on this panel with, right? A Latino who was breaking barriers, but not just breaking barriers, but bringing others along with her, right? And so that's also really important, I think, for those of us that have been the beneficiaries of so many people like Kate and others, like the vice president, like Hillary Clinton, like many women of color across the country, Catherine Cortez Masto, another great one, your senior senator. We have to bring people up with us. And two, we have to talk about them. We have to lift up those people that are in those positions, and we got to make sure that people know that that is possible, and wherever there might be an obstacle, that we're working to remove that obstacle, so that there are more people in those positions. But, I've been a very lucky beneficiary, and I take my responsibility very seriously of making sure that if I'm the first person in the position, I'm definitely not the last, and that I'm opening the doors as wide as possible for many more people who either share my experience or don't share my experience, right? But who might be the first in those positions as well.
Thank you, Bami. I definitely do agree. We definitely got to talk about folks and lift up those who are in positions, because in that way, that's how we can make changes, and that's how we encourage folks who look like us that we can be those things, that one day we'll be in those seats. And from what I'm hearing, we're going to be starting the Lieutenant Governor Kate Marshall fan club right after this, is what I'm hearing. And I'm seeing lots of smiles on the screens, so we have our membership. Alrighty, and now I have some questions for the Lieutenant Governor. Alrighty, so last year, President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law. And just as the president said, this is what Americans want, and special interest laws. I love that line, so I'm going to go ahead and say it again, just like he did. Americans want and special interest laws. So with this law, we saw lots of amazing things, from capping the cost of insulin, pushing back against Big Pharma, and more. Lieutenant Governor, talk to us about healthcare access. Where do we go from here?
Thank you. Well, first off, I think we should all seek to emulate Emory Ruiz. She is someone I admire greatly, and it's an opportunity for us to see what people can do in this country. Anyway, also her children are adorable. So let's talk a little bit about the Inflation Reduction Act, because it gave so much to this country, right? So a lot of people think about it in terms of, oh, well, we got all this clean energy and we can get solar panels and we can get electric cars. But one of the things I want to talk about is things that affect people day to day, especially here in Nevada, and that's healthcare access. The Inflation Reduction Act, one of the things that it did was it said that starting January 1st of this year, insulin will be capped at $35 for a copay. That's nice, it's fancy language, but let me bring that home a little bit. The other day I was in the grocery store at Rayleigh's in Reno, and I was waiting in line to get a prescription, and there was a woman in front of me, very well-dressed woman, and she asked to see the pharmacist. This was in December. And the pharmacist came out and she said to him, I don't know why I was denied my insulin medication because I do have diabetes, and she showed him her strips to show that she had diabetes. And the pharmacist said to her, you weren't denied. $125 is your copay for your insulin. I went around in the store, and by chance, when I came up to the checkout stand, there she was in front of me. And I watched her hand coupons to the checkout clerk. So I want to tell you that what the Inflation Reduction Act does is it makes it so that that woman will not have to pay $125 for her insulin. She will have to pay $35. And maybe that will help the rest of her grocery bill. That is what the Inflation Reduction Act does. But there's more that we can do. Because when they were negotiating the Inflation Reduction Act, originally it included not just people on Medicare, but all of us to get these lower prescription drug costs. And at the end of the day, that little line and those with private insurance was crossed out. And so I'll tell you that one very simple thing we can do here in Nevada is bring state legislation and say that we are going to follow the federal law and expand it to reach people in Nevada who have private health insurance. So that if that lady was paying $125 with private health insurance, we're going to drop that to $35. That's what I think we should do.
Your words to the goddess's ears, that is a very, goodness. Ooh, that definitely is where we should be going next. So, Lieutenant Governor, I recently saw this article. I think it was from Krugman. I think it was called the football game of theory of inflation. In this article, it talked about how inflation is a conflict between workers, corporations, and taxpayers. The article talked about how corporations can raise costs, workers may ask for higher wages, and taxpayers are shortened. Can you talk to us about some solutions about this, and where we go from there?
Yeah, so first let's just set the table a little bit with what Krugman was referring to. Basically, when you have inflation, right, costs go up. And we have heard the president say that corporations are profiteering from this. And you know what that is. That is to say that when you go to the grocery store or when you go to the gas station, not only does it cost more, but it costs a lot more because they've not only raised the price a little, but they've raised the price for their share so that they can benefit their shareholders. Well, what happens when the corporations do that is that then the person who's working, you, me, most of the people in this country, the person that's getting a salary, okay, has to pay more for gas, has to pay more for groceries, has to pay more for electricity. And so they need to ask for higher wages because their wages are not covering it, right? A dime ain't just what it used to be. To be quite blunt, if you're still paying a nickel or a dime for coffee, I want to know where you're going because that's not what it costs today. So at the same time that this happens, the other entity that pays for this is the taxpayer. Because now when you want to build roads, now when you want to build schools, those things cost more. The Federal Reserve, the way that they are trying to tamp down on this is they are increasing interest rates. And so they kind of press their thumb both on corporations and on workers and on the taxpayer. Because when you borrow money to build those roads, gonna cost you more. And what I want to suggest to you is that putting your thumb on everyone equally is not fair. Because when you spend most of your money on groceries and electricities and gas, right, then a higher percentage of your income is impacted by inflation. Basically, if you're a worker, you suffer more. And you know this because during the pandemic, people who worked for a living got poorer quicker. And it's been a hard road for them to get back. So how can we respond to that? What can we do? What can we in Nevada do to give people a little bit of a break, just a little breathing room? Let's go right back to that healthcare access. Let's go right back to that lady who asked to speak to the pharmacist, who said, why is it $125 for my insulin? If we in Nevada can lower prescription drug prices for working people, we can give them a little bit of breathing room, right? We can give them a little bit of breathing room. What else can we do? You and I know that housing is so expensive here. Why is housing expensive? Our economy is growing, so people are coming in to get higher paying jobs. They're bidding up the price of houses, and what about everybody else? What about your rent? What about if you think that you have enough money to get a house, right? All of a sudden you're priced out. So what can we do? When I grew up, I lived in a neighborhood. I lived in a lot of neighborhoods, to tell you the truth, I moved a lot. But I lived in a neighborhood where we had old people and young people and middle class people and working class people and not doing so well people. We had all kinds of people in the neighborhood. We could do that again. We can say, here's your incentive to these developers. If you're going to build houses, I'm going to incent you to build houses that are for all kinds of people. Right now, there's lots of incentives to build very fancy homes at a very high price, very fancy apartments at a very high price. And it's incumbent upon us, the city, the county, the state, right? Your elected officials, call them on it to create incentives to build houses for everyone. Because the truth of the matter is that if you want to lift all boats, it's not exactly what Reagan said. It's not that we lower taxes for the wealthy and all boats lift. If you want to lift all boats, you have to make sure that everyone can participate in growth.
Goodness, I wish you all could have seen our faces. We were all definitely swooning over this wealth of knowledge. I genuinely do appreciate that very much so. My next question for you, Lieutenant Governor. So we've seen this. Many Dems want to see radical changes. I want to see radical changes. Every single person on this call right now and our friends who are watching right now want to see big changes. But it makes me wonder, is there an argument for step-by-step growth, or has that boat sailed?
I think there is. I think that we can have gentle growth, if you will, and be kind to all. I think sometimes when we think about radical change, we think, I'm going to do this very large thing, and everything's going to change overnight. But the fact of the matter is that you heard Emmy Ruiz say right at the beginning, change takes time. Some of the things that the president has enacted haven't reached us yet, like the tax plans he's enacted. We haven't really seen the benefit of that yet. So one of the things I think that we can focus on is changing step by step to make sure that there's no loopholes and to make sure that we cover everyone in that change so that everyone gets to benefit in that growth, right? Think about this, for example. I always try to think about mom. I have two daughters. I should tell you, they gave me this necklace for Christmas, and it has each of their initials in a little circle on the necklace, and I don't think I'm ever going to take it off. Anyway, so, but think about this. We're benching our moms in this field. We are benching our moms. we have so many employers and small businesses who say, I need people to work for me. Great. Then let's make sure that daycare is affordable. Let's make sure that there's flexible work schedules. Because otherwise, mom can't do it. Mom can't do it. This is not radical change. We have the child care tax credit. We can continue with that. This is incremental change. This is dealing with mom's daycare. This is dealing with mom's ability to get lunch to her kids, drop her kids off for school before she gets to work. These are small steps that make a big difference in people's lives. It would help small businesses. They'd have workers. We wouldn't bench our moms.
Oh, that's one to remember. I'm definitely going to write that. We don't bench our moms, and thank you to your daughters for the amazing gift idea. I'm definitely going to think about one for my own mom.
You're welcome.
Well, I'll get it for her, and when she wears it, I'll send you a picture so you can tell me as much as she loves it. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to my friend, Taylor Patterson. Friend of the show, I have an amazing question for you, and I think you are the only person who can answer this one particular question that I have. I know 2022 was a year with historic wins and losses for Indian country. How does the landscape in Nevada compare to the rest of the country?
I mean, clearly from Emmy and former Lieutenant Governor Kate Marshall, we've got some of the best women coming out of this state in general. I'm just recovering from falling in love with Kate Marshall a little bit there. That was such an amazing talk from both women. And it's really, I think, Nevada has such great talent and such great people here. And I love to see everybody move on to the White House or all of these different roles that are so exciting. And so, I think we have some great people here in Nevada. But across the country, we're seeing a lot of different struggles, with primarily legal issues that are popping up, and the Supreme Court are ruling on them. So, we have Indian case law that has been settled for years and years and years that is now coming up questionable, and we have the Supreme Court ruling on things in a bunch of different ways. And while it's been very easy to tell which of our Supreme Court justices lean a little right or lean a little left and kind of where they fall on that spectrum, it can be really hard to tell where people land on tribal sovereignty. And so generally, I think in Nevada, we're in a better place. We've had such supportive legislators pop up and really want to move incredible legislation for our community. And so another big exciting thing for Nevada is we finally got our native legislator back. So within the state body, we have Shay Backus, who is our one and only legislator that is a member of a federally recognized tribe. And so, she has served in the past in the assembly, and I'm really excited to see what she's going to do this upcoming session. And so I think, 2021, our legislative session was amazing for Indigenous people. We had great conservation bills move. We had the Native tuition waiver bill get passed and get enacted. We saw some really wonderful things come out of the legislature, and I'm hoping again that we can see things move. I'm a little curious, we'll say, to see how our new governor is going to treat tribal issues, because like I alluded to earlier with the Supreme Court, when it comes to issues of left and right, tribal sovereignty and tribal issues don't really fall under either of those things. People can be really far right and really far left and not necessarily agree with our communities on the way that we should be governed or that things that affect us should be happening. So I'm really excited to see what's going to come out of this legislative session. I think overall we're in a much better place in Nevada than a lot of other states, and I'm excited to see what happens next.
Speaking of what's happening next, can you tell us what bills you would like to see in the upcoming legislative session?
Yeah, so some of the stuff I really want, that I kind of alluded to a little bit ago, is I want to see Nevada codify some of the things that we're losing federally. So I would love to see more movement on the Indian Child Welfare Act, and I would love to see bigger overarching tribal sovereignty really upheld within the state. I think it always becomes kind of a tough issue because, Indigenous rights and tribal sovereignty is such a federal issue. there's so much our state legislature can do to uphold that tribal sovereignty. And we've seen in the past, like I said, conservation bills, but also when it comes to Indian burial grounds, artifacts, all of that stuff that is literally our ancestors' bones, that can be upheld by the Nevada legislature and allowing our people to have first rights over that and to have the appropriate amount of discretion with our sacred sites. And so I definitely am excited to see some new conservation and land bills come up. And I would love, I don't think this is necessarily the session for it, but I would love to see a further expansion in our tuition waiver bill. I think I'm so happy Assemblywoman Natha Anderson brought that bill forward, because it is something we in the community had talked about for a really long time of why can't our Native students go to school tuition free. It's something that a lot of other states have implemented. It's something our state previously had. What the heck was the holdup? So it was really courageous of her to, in a time where our state was definitely struggling, say, hey, we can't leave Native kids behind. Just because we have a bunch of other priorities post-COVID doesn't mean that our Native communities are left out. So I would really love to see that expanded back towards its original form that the Assemblywoman intended, allowing all tribal descendants to go to college tuition free here in Nevada, not just those that are from Nevada tribes. So I would love that. And of course, the hill that I'm going to die on forever and ever and ever is Indigenous Peoples Day. I really would love to see Indigenous Peoples Day come statewide. We had such a great experience working on that with the Clark County Commission. And I know the city of Reno has enacted it. We've had other municipalities in Nevada that have changed Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. And I really, really want to see that go statewide. And I think it's so important. You know, I've told the story a bunch of times, and I'm sure I've told it on Out in Front and some other DMV programs. But I'll say it again, you know, my mom had to come to my classrooms to educate students on what it meant to be a Paiute woman, who even Paiute people were. And so to have our students not know anything about the original people of Nevada is a real shame, because, you know, my husband's family is from Ohio, for instance. Currently, they have 0 federally recognized tribes in Ohio. We have 28 federally recognized tribes here in the state of Nevada, a really rich history of tribal communities here in the state that most of our children aren't learning about. And I was really lucky over the Christmas break to get to go to Australia and New Zealand. And in these places, we have such a big push and movement towards learning about Aboriginal cultures, learning about Maori cultures. We have New Zealand making it compulsory for children to learn the Maori language, even in its basic form, and trying to get folks to really understand their Indigenous cultures. And I really hope we as a country, but specifically we as Nevadans, can move towards that.
You know, Taylor, I've never told you this before, but the first time I heard you tell that story, it actually encouraged me to look into my roots and better understand my identity as a Native woman. Never told you that before, so I thought Here Why Not is the best time to tell you this story. So thank you, and thank you to your mother for encouraging me to do that. My next question for you is, how can non-Native support progress for the Indigenous communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, you notice I always have to get in my humble brags about traveling. But that kind of leads into this. I think so many people travel the world, travel even just within the United States, and don't have any clue about what sort of Indigenous people were there beforehand. And I think it's really interesting because you have cultures that were so rich, so large, pre-contact, that have essentially been erased in a lot of ways. And so I think, like, one of the basic things people can do, and at this point, I feel like this is basic mode for the BVP audience, even though they're like, at this point, after hearing me talk for a few years, should be on expert level when it comes to supporting Indigenous people. But at the bare minimum, find out whose land you're on. Find out about the tribes that existed pre-contact. Find out about the tribes that are still existing. You may be in a place like Ohio that doesn't have any federally recognized tribes today. That doesn't mean there was no Indigenous people there pre-contact. That just means they got moved out and, you know, had a lot of horrifying history about it. So find out who those people are. And I think there's so much reconciling to do with the history of this country, and it becomes kind of a drag, just in the most like basic terms of, God, everything is built on colonialism, everything is built on racism, and it gets to be a lot. But I think finding the beauty in all of these different cultures and different stories is the best part of it, and getting to consume Indigenous media, books, and television. And when I was on the plane ride, again, my humble brag about traveling, I pulled up the little Delta screen to watch a movie, and on there was the movie Smoke Signals. And I told my husband, I said, about the last 2 years, Smoke Signals was about the only piece of true Native American media. It was one of the only films that we could look at and go, that was made for us, by us. But now we don't have that issue so much anymore. We have such great media. We have Reservation Dogs, and we have books, and all of these things that are coming into the forefront that can teach people what it is like to be like us a little bit. And so I think having that basic knowledge and understanding is very much step one. And I love people's curiosity, for sure. And I think there's always a line of respectfulness, right? I tend to be a little bit more friendly about questions, but I think weeding through some of the ignorance is definitely tough. And I've definitely had issues of, oh, well, you guys don't pay taxes, and all of these like old stereotypical things that are just absolutely not true. I want to let everybody know I pay taxes. I wish I could get out of it. It would be phenomenal. But, there's a lot there that I think people don't know. And so do your research, number one. And I also think the biggest thing that is triggering to me, and I think to a lot of Indigenous people, is erasure, period. And so when I see organizations or people having multicultural events, but there's no Indigenous representation, we have community leaders that think BIPOC initiatives don't include the I, they don't include the Indigenous people. I've had a lot of issues where, even our county commission, who has been so friendly, so wonderful to us, did a Women's History Month presentation. It honored so many wonderful women in the community, so many wonderful women, and did not include one Native American woman in that representation. And so when I see things like that, it just makes me understand that we need to keep pushing forward and keep having people even just recognize that we're here. So I encourage people to really include Native Americans in all of those things, whether it's a community event, whether it's, when you're doing your lesson plans, if you're a teacher, have all of the Native American stuff in with all of these other multicultural things.
Well, thank you so much, Taylor, for setting the record straight. The world would have never known, so thank you.
And we'll add one addendum. My big thing is to everybody stop celebrating Columbus Day. Can we just knock it out once and for all? No more Columbus Day. Let's finally, second Monday in October, learn about Indigenous people. We know about the need of the Pinta Santa Maria. That's old news. My man was lost, okay? Let's go ahead and everybody, that's the call to action I want. Everybody needs to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, finally.
I'm down with that. I am definitely on that hill with you. One of my favorite things I've ever heard Taylor say was that you can't talk about BIPOC folks, Black, Indigenous, people of color without the I. And that definitely is holding true still today, tomorrow, and every day after that. Next up, Eric. Eric, so in 2022, we saw unprecedented turnout among Asian and Pacific Islander American voters across the country. We also saw lots of gains in elected officials as well. But what does that mean for our community here in Nevada? And how is the AAPI community responding to the overall growth in political and issue engagement?
Yeah, thank you so much. And for us, it's exciting to be able to do this work. I think this is every cycle that we get to be unprecedented because we are able to grow based on what we built, the organizing infrastructure, the advocacy infrastructure. And I think we're here bringing Progressive Summit and me representing One APN Nevada. our organizing thesis is to break away from the traditional cyclical investment from political campaigns, where for locals they feel like there's talent organizer, they're parachute in, but then they only stay through the longest through Labor Day to Election Day, the shortest for the GOTV get out the vote weekend. So an organization like ours now being able to listen to the community and progressing along, moving forward with our community, is finding out what the community cares about, what can we build through grassroots, and being able to celebrate that. So in 2018 and now I want to say 2022, being the margin of victory, seeing the growth in the Southwest, in Spring Valley, in Enterprise area of Las Vegas, seeing also a growth in Northern Nevada, in Reno, and Washoe County. It's very exciting. Our community is diverse, our community is growing, and there's about half of the folks are newly naturalized citizens. That means they're foreign born, but through naturalization, now they are voters. So they're first generation Americans. I think that's the American dream. So also in Nevada, I want to celebrate right now as we are 2 weeks away from the start of sessions. We have 7 legislators that identify as Asian or Pacific Islander through the state Senate, the newly appointed Senator Rochelle Wen. And then on the Assembly side, we have 6 legislators from seniority, Assemblywoman Brittany Miller, Assemblywoman Cecilia Torres, Assemblywoman Cecilia Gonzalez, and then the newly elected this time with Erica Mosca and with Ruben Silva, and also with our own Yuli Wen, who's from the community. And these are the folks that we've been partnered with them, that have been they're part of our AAPI Lobby Day in the past, and now we get to host an AAPI Lobby Day in 2 months and fly out there and knock on their doors and talk to them. So I think this is the growth. It's showing the community not just to show up and vote, not just for us as our C3 counterpart, Asian Community Development Council has registered more than 36,000 people since 2015, but not just the register to vote part. That's a start. That's great. Having great events like Dim Sum or Boba, we do amazing Pokemon to the polls. We actually do it. We do all the K-pop and give people shuttle to the early vote location. Those are amazing. But now is letting our community understand all these policies that we want to let them know our elected officials are from the community, care about the community. It's no longer just photo ops in Chinatown. That's amazing. That's the first step. But now, how do we do on the policy side for state legislature? And since I have White House officials, senior officials on this call, I want to give a shout out just earlier this week on Tuesday, January 17th, this White House with the initiative on Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, and API, the White House initiative, WIAPI, that's what we call it, unveiled the first agenda on advancing justice, equity, and opportunity. Through that, we also wanted to applaud President Biden sign into law the preservation for World War II Japanese internment camps, basically concentration camps for Japanese Americans on our soil. And we want to make sure that the history are preserved or learned, so we never do that again. We never forget about that. So that's on the federal side, and we are able to see all the different federal agencies come together, seeing the report of what has been done and what can be advanced. And now, as for One API Nevada, the Nevada part is how do we take that lesson and see what we can do on the state, on the county, and on the municipal level. So these are the things that I'm very excited about, and being able to bring our community forward. I think this is something that we get to build and move together.
You heard it here, folks. It's not enough to Naruto run to the polls. We have to keep our community engaged year-round and let them know about the good fight that we're working for them. So, Eric, the AAPI community in Nevada is growing, and we're diverse. What are some issues that are on top of minds of the community members and voters? What are some policy priorities that One API in Nevada is bringing forward to the upcoming legislative sessions?
That's awesome. And I just jump in for my first question. I normally go for the 2 things I always say at any chances, even from talking to community members. I say it in Chinese, or talking to our legislators when I have one-on-one meetings, or opportunity like this to share with my fellow advocates and organizers and volunteers and people that are just interested. is the Asian Pacific Islander community or the API community here in Nevada. We're not a monolith, so it's very diverse in itself. We have the largest community, I don't know which way to point, for the Filipinos. That's probably about 45% of the API community. The API community itself is about 12% of the state's population. Nevada is a state of 3.1 million people. The Asian Pacific Islander communities are about 380 to 390,000 people, depending on how you count through the census. So Filipino is the largest population, and then followed by Chinese, and then Japanese, South Asian Indians, and then Pacific Islanders, Vietnamese, Koreans, and then all different South Asian and Southeast Asian countries. That's the country of origins. So that make up a very diverse, I would like to say that former Secretary of Transportation Norman Mineta said, it's like tapestry. It's not salad bowl, it's not a mix, it's not melting pot, a tapestry of different fabric that we have from different culture, from different backgrounds, different experiences, different languages. So that itself is diverse. And we are not a model minority. I think that is the one thing that we want to dispel that myth. It was created back in the 80s and 90s or even earlier to use Asian and Pacific Islander pit against each other, pit against the Black community, Brown community, Indigenous community, to have this straw thing that's like wedging the communities as a whole, the community colors as a whole. So we want to say that in order for us to have that solidarity, a lot of time is having that conversation with our community, is having that conversation to let them know what justice, what winning equity, what winning opportunity for our community means. So that goes back to the state legislative session that's about to happen. To say the least of all of this different culture, different community, the first thing is representation. And we are seeing that. We're trying to do lobby today to let the community know, yes, there's representation. We have about 11% of our state legislators now identify as API, on track of the 12% of the general population. That's a great first step, but we cannot stop there. Next is on the policy part. So it's language access. The most basic one is making sure the voting rights access, the voting rights protection that we have to make sure our community's voices are heard. We, through the census complete count, through redistricting, letting our community's voices are heard, and through also shout out to Lieutenant Governor Marshall, that was she led the state's complete count committee, especially the hard to count committee, and partner with all the organizations together through 2018, late 2018, 2019 to 2020 to return all the communities vote. Next is the redistricting part. Now after redistricting with the new making sure our communities are making sure their voices are heard, now it's protecting their access for democracy, but now for the language part. We missed Chinese on the ballot by about 500 people that identify as limited English proficient. So for us in the state of Nevada, through Voting Rights Act, Section 203, we already have Spanish and Tagalog on our ballot. Now we want to expand that access to make sure if we can help as community advocate. And also on the North of Nevada, they have amazing international center with the language bank. With us in the community, we know, we read the newspaper that the community reading. We are in the WeChat Facebook group. We are in the WhatsApp groups. We know what the community understand. Now, how do we make sure that we become the trusted messenger to just translate whatever the governor is putting out, the government is putting out, that from the Clark County to the Washoe County Election Department to the Secretary of State, to make sure the community understand the process. So that's language access, that's a big one. And then we know there's more and more coming up as we are making those conversations with our legislator, and hopefully the relaunch of the API caucus, all the different healthcare issues, education issues, immigrant rights issue, even climate and conservation, that is part of the community's concern as well. So a lot of things to do, and hopefully really looking forward to bringing community members up, bringing the youth up for our API Lobby Day, to let folks know that we have very accessible from federal elected to state elected to county and municipal elected officials, and bringing the community voices up and making sure people feel they're heard, feel they're seen, feel their issues are prioritized.
Thank you, Eric. You heard it here straight, folks. We are not a monolith. We are a tapestry, and we come together through our unique stories. And most importantly, we have to meet the community where they're at. And that's a wrap. Again, a special thank you to our all-star panel, Emmy Ruiz, Lieutenant Governor Kate Marshall, Taylor Patterson, and Eric Chang. We've accomplished so much in the past few years, but there's still so much left to do. The road to liberation is a long one, but just as Emmy said, progress takes time, and together we're going to make those changes happen. I'm honored to have host this amazing panel, and we'll see you all right after the break. But don't forget to share your favorite summit moment with the hashtags PS 2023 and hashtag Nevada Summit. And I'll see you all right after the break.
Thank you, Matilda. And Matilda and the entire panel were excellent. You're going to actually see Matilda again in just a few minutes. So she's going to take a quick break, and she's going to be right back with us with our next panel. We're going to take about a 5-minute break, and we'll be right back with you. Thanks, everyone. Make sure you're visiting all of our tabling tables. And remember, you can go to the different floors by using the elevator on the side of your screen to visit the different floors and go to the different tables. So please do that now.